All right, coming up on today's Four Verts episode where we talk NFL and college football every single day. I've got 5 post-draft blockbuster trade ideas. My name is Harrison Graham. Let's dive into it. Okay, let's get to the big name that is still out there. That is, of course, Trey Hendrickson, who's with the Cincinnati Bengals. Doesn't sound like there's anything new there in terms of progress on a contract for him to stay in Cincinnati. They, of course, paid both T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, and historically they've been pretty cheap, so to triple down in one offseason on mega contracts would go against the grain of what they've done historically. He's a little bit older. I still think there's a decent chance he gets traded, and if I'm him, I'm not reporting to camp without a new deal this year. So how about Washington, the Commanders, who have been busy this offseason, right? They traded for Laremy Tunsil, Deebo Samuel, made a few splashes in free agency and in the draft. But what they haven't really done is draft or even sign a notable pass rusher. And to me, that's kind of the missing piece on their defense right now. Dorrance Armstrong is fine. Dietrich Wise, that's not a starter in the NFL. They cut loose of Jonathan Allen. I like their interior, Deron Payne and Jerzon Newton. But they need another edge rusher, and they need a number one. They don't have that. You put Trey Hendrickson next to Payne and Newton, that's a pretty formidable trio on that defensive line. And you're talking about kind of the sack king in the NFL over the last few years. 35 sacks the past 2 seasons, has a 14-sack season in 2021 as well. He wants to cash in one more time, and I don't blame him. Last offseason, he wanted a new deal, but, with 2 years left, said, okay, I'll play. He proved it again with 17 and a half more sacks, 11 more QB hits than he had the year before. He's a dominant player. And if you're the Commanders, I think you got to ask yourself, do you think Trey Hendrickson is the difference? Is he the difference in being, a 10 to 12 win team that, gets to the second round or maybe the NFC title game again? Or does that help you close the gap between yourself and Philadelphia in the NFC East and just overall in the NFC pecking order? Because let's face it, last year they were not the second best team in the NFC. Detroit was, and they had 600 injuries. So I think even if Washington's going to be better this year, you could still argue that they're a piece or two away from potentially getting out of the NFC. But a guy like Trey Hendrickson can help you do that. And this is the time when you take swings like this, when you have a rookie quarterback on his rookie contract that you feel really good about. So here's my trade idea. Bengals get a 3rd this year, a 4th next year. Commanders get Trey Hendrickson. I don't think they're getting a 1 for him. I don't think they're getting a 2. The Commanders actually don't have a 2 next year. So if it was going to be a 2, it'd be a 2 in 2027. But a 3rd this year, 4th next year, that adds up to close to a 2. I think that's a fair offer because the Commanders are going to have to turn around and pay him north of $35 million per year. And the Bengals, deep down, know they're probably not going to do that. So they're probably going to have to take less on a trade and just part ways with Trey Hendrickson, unless they're going to put their money where their mouth is. And up to this point, they have not done that. All right, guys, if we get 50 new subscribers today, we'll do our first ever Q&A mailbag episode later in the week. We've never done a mailbag here on 4 Verts, where we take all of your NFL or even college football questions here on the show. So first, we got to check step 1, and that's getting 50 new subscribers. So if you want daily NFL and college football content for free, all you got to do is subscribe. We will check back in tomorrow. If we picked up 50 new subs, we will do a mailbag, and we'll kind of do a call out to get some of your questions later in the week. Okay, Kenneth Walker to the Bears. The Bears for months were linked to Ashton Jeanty, Trey Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Amarian Hampton, the next tier of running backs, and then they didn't get one in the draft until the 7th round in Kyle Monangai, a player I think they like, but they wanted to get a higher level talent to pair with DeAndre Swift. That is very, very clear. And I still think if the right opportunity came at the right cost, they would like to do just that. Ben Johnson has expressed excitement to reunite with DeAndre Swift, but I think there's real question marks after him. Can Roschon Johnson be more than what he's been through 2 seasons? Is Kyle Monangai ready to be a number 2 in a 1-2 punch? That's, he could. He's got good contact balance, good impatient runner, but he's a 7th rounder for a reason. There is some limitations there. So do you go out and take a swing on a guy like Kenneth Walker, who's entering the final year of his rookie contract? Seattle's got a more crowded running back room in terms of guys who are, pretty darn capable. The Bears have been linked to like Nick Chubb, J.K. Dobbins, but like, are those real needle movers at this point? A little, but probably not in a major way. Kenneth Walker, that moves the needle in Chicago. His numbers have gone down a little bit, but obviously they've split carries with him and Zach Charbonnet. They had some O-line issues last year. Chicago invested heavily in the offensive line this offseason with Joe Thuney, Drew Dolman, and Jonah Jackson. They drafted Ozzie Trapillo. So Kenneth Walker running behind that line and being part of a 1-2 punch with DeAndre Swift, I think is pretty appealing if you are a Bears fan. And for Seattle, again, they've got 4, I think, playable backs, like guys that I would want to give touches to. So are you keeping Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, Damian Martinez, who I thought was one of the steals of the draft in round 7, and Kenny McIntosh? Unless Martinez comes in and, just isn't very good for whatever reason or is immature, because there were rumors of that, and is not ready for a role as a rookie, I think one of Walker or Charbonnet gets traded, and I think the Bears could be a natural landing spot for really either of those players to pair with DeAndre Swift. So, simple idea for me. 4th-round pick for Kenneth Walker. In a vacuum, is Kenneth Walker worth maybe a 3rd-round pick? Perhaps, but I think Seattle would lose a little leverage in this situation given how crowded their room is, and he is in the final year of his rookie deal, so if they're not willing to pay him in terms of an extension, the most they could get in the comp pick formula game next year would be a 3rd, and that's if everything went right. Probably looking at more like a 4th or a 5th, so if you can get a 4 for him, if they like the rest of their running back room, I think they would consider it. We'll see. This feels more like a training camp, latent training camp type of trade, like, okay, we like Martinez. We like the role McIntosh has. Charbonnet can be the lead guy. We're willing to trade Kenneth Walker. So we'll see if something happens there. Keep an eye on that Seattle running back room. Okay, George Pickens to the New York Giants. Obviously, Russell Wilson being there. We'll talk about that connection in a second. But George Pickens, of course, is a polarizing player, to say the least. He's risky because he's got attitude, effort concerns at times. He's talented as hell, though. I mean, to me, he's one of the best contested catch guys in the league. You could throw back shoulders to him, deep balls, which Russell Wilson can make both of those throws. Those are 2 of the better throws he excels at, especially at this point in his career. The Giants are trying to win now, so they could be a team to take that risk because they got to show ownership, hey, we're on the right track. And a guy like George Pickens, putting him opposite of Malik Neighbors and, putting a little less on Darius Slayton's play, I think elevates the room, elevates that wide receiver room and the offense as a whole. The talent is there. This guy could be a true number 1 in the league, but the beauty of this situation is he just come in and be a number 2. Be a deep play threat. Malik Neighbors is going to be our primary target. You already have a rapport with Russell Wilson, who throws one of the better deep balls in the league. Russ is going to give him chances. Pickens' year started to take off once Russ got inserted into the lineup after the first 6 weeks with Justin Fields last year. So I think the Giants are one of the few teams that would take the chance on Pickens, just given the head coach and GM status with the team. Like, they know they got to be competitive this year. Dallas was another team I considered, but I think New York makes a lot of sense. So here's my trade idea. Conditional 5th-round pick that could turn into a 4 if he re-signs or it gets extended at some point with the Giants. So essentially, if they keep him after next year, that turns into a 4. And then Jalen Hyatt back to Pittsburgh. Because if you get George Pickens, to me, Jalen Hyatt is kind of redundant at that point because New York would have Malik Neighbors, George Pickens, Darius Slayton, and Wan'Dale Robinson. There's really no role for Jalen Hyatt at that point in time. And so Pittsburgh takes a flyer on a guy who has big playability in Hyatt. Again, the reason it's only a 5th that could turn to a 4 is because of the attitude concerns with Pickens. He's probably worth a 2nd or a 3rd as a player, but dips a little bit. A, because it's the last year of his rookie deal, and B, he's been considered tough to deal with at times throughout his rookie contract. Okay, Jalen Ramsey to the Rams. There's been actual reporting on this. There's a lot of buzz that he could head back to Los Angeles. Sean McVay was asked to comment on it recently, and he said there are a lot of layers when you're talking about a player of his caliber with regards to the contract, the compensation that they would be looking for in exchange for receiving a player of his magnitude. And so those conversations are ongoing, as I'm sure they are with multiple teams. He's a total stud, and you look at, obviously, he has continued to play at a high level. He and I have kept in great touch since we ended up trading him to Miami. Special competitor, great person, and a great father. Look, to me, this is kind of a win-win if you can work out the financials, because the Rams need a corner. They're trying to win this year, and the Dolphins want off that contract. I think they regret giving him that big extension last year. He's 30 now. They don't want an aging, expensive corner on their roster for where they're at as a football team. And if you pay attention to their draft, they're trying to become more of a physical team in the trenches. So trying to move off Ramsey makes sense, but the financials are tough, which is why I think a fifth-round pick might get this done, because the reports out of Miami are that they don't want to be held responsible for the cash on the contract. So the Rams, obviously they'd get hit with some dead cap penalty, but the Rams would be hit with the actual cash flow of the contract, and I think Miami would rather take a fifth than, a third or a fourth, but being stuck with some of the cash flow for Ramsey. So I think LA, who historically has been very aggressive in these type of moves, could really benefit from this situation. Okay, lastly, Romeo Doubs to Dallas. I mentioned the Cowboys as a potential George Pickens suitor, but they haven't made that level of a splash in a while. Doubs is kind of a lesser commodity, but still a very capable player. Dallas really needs a receiver. I mean, kind of like the Bears with running backs in the draft, they were heavily linked to receivers. Matthew Golden, Tedero, McMillan, some early round guys. They didn't draft one. They just did not get one. So you've got CeeDee Lamb, who's obviously a superstar, but then Jalen Tolbert, who's been okay, but mostly a bust. Jonathan Mingo, who's been a bust. They traded for at the deadline last year. He's yet to do anything in Dallas. Cavante Turpin's a fun slot gadget guy, but he's not a 2. He's really probably like a 4. Romeo Doubs, probably more of a 3 than a 2, but for this team, he'd be a 2. He's big, he's physical, can play on the outside. Does have some injury concerns, so that's obviously noteworthy, but he's been pretty steady in a crowded wide receiver room. I think in Dallas, he could have like an 800-yard season. I think that's very possible as CeeDee Lamb's number 2. And look how crowded this room is for Green Bay. I mean, they've got Doubs. They drafted Matt Golden, Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, who's injured. We'll see if and when he plays this year, but they've still got him. They still have Dontavian Wicks. They drafted Savion Williams, who will do a little bit of everything, but he'll play some receiver. Hell, Malik Heath, Bo Melton. I mean, they got like 8 dudes that could play a receiver. Who's that? Yeah, I forgot they signed McCole Hardman. They got like 19 receivers. I mean, they're going to have to pivot off of at least one, if not 2 of these guys. Now, if Watson's out for the year, that might solve one of those problems where, well, he's unavailable. But I'd be stunned if Green Bay didn't move off at least one of these players. And the league kind of knows it. Like, they kind of know that Green Bay is going to have to pivot off one of these guys. And they tipped their hand when they drafted Golden in the first round and then doubled down with Savion Williams, who, again, will probably play some running back too, but is still going to eat some snaps at receiver. So my trade idea, given the lack of leverage in this situation, I think like a 5th-round pick probably does it. Final year of his rookie deal, Packers crowded wide receiver room. I think you could get him for a 5 if you are Dallas, and that could potentially end up being a great steal. And if he has a good year, there's your number 2 receiver long term next to CeeDee Lamb. Okay, name a player you want your favorite team to trade for. Who would you like to see your team go get? So let us know who your team is in the comments, and then list the player you would like that team to go out and acquire. Also, final reminder, if we get 50 new subscribers today, I've written down the number of subs we're currently at as of filming this, Q&A episode later this week. We've never done one here on 4Verts. We'll take your questions and throw them all together on a mailbag episode. Need 50 new subscribers to make it happen. So if you want it to happen, hit that sub button, and we'll see you soon.